It's time we upgrade from outdated innovations to real market disruptors, Marcus declared, his lips curling into that practiced smile that probably took hours to perfect in his bathroom mirror while applying imported face serums and reciting affirmations about crushing the competition. His eyes swept across the boardroom, lingering just a moment too long on Maya's perfectly composed face. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The executive boardroom at Helix Pharmaceuticals fell silent. Not the comfortable kind of silence that follows good news. This was the vacuum-sealed silence that happens when 20 brilliant minds collectively realize they're witnessing a career execution. No one moved. The quarterly projections still glowed on the screen behind Marcus Fletcher, recently appointed Chief Innovation Officer, who stood with his hands planted on the polished mahogany table like he was claiming new territory. The company-branded notebooks, the ones he'd insisted on ordering at $85 each for Innovation Mindset Cultivation, were scattered across the table, untouched. Effective immediately, Marcus continued, pacing like a motivational speaker. Who charged $50,000 per appearance, Maya Chen is no longer heading our R&D division. We're pivoting toward AI-integrated drug discovery platforms that can accelerate our pipeline without the bottlenecks of traditional research methodologies. Maya didn't flinch. Didn't stand up. Didn't launch into the desperate defense everyone expected from someone whose 15-year career was being shredded in front of colleagues who suddenly found their coffee cups fascinating. Instead, she blinked slowly, almost sympathetically, like she was watching a child proudly announce they'd colored on the living room walls and called it art. Her dark eyes, calm as still water, betrayed nothing. Her lab coat, she always wore it to executive meetings, a small rebellion against corporate dress codes, remained perfectly buttoned, her posture straight as a ruler. Dr. Keller from legal examined her cuticles with newfound interest. James from manufacturing studied the ceiling tiles like they contained secret messages. 20 seconds of silence stretched into 40, then 60, interrupted only by the soft hum of the air conditioning and Marcus's increasingly uncomfortable throat clearing. You'll be escorted out by HR after this meeting, he added, his voice hardening to cover the awkwardness. Your access credentials will be revoked by end of day. Maya glanced down at her tablet, thumb swiping across the screen with practiced precision. A notification appeared, somehow louder than it should have been in the silent room. Patent office meeting, 2:30 p.m. Final review of neurogenesis, 7 enzyme stabilization process. Attendees, USPTO Senior Examiner J. Rodriguez, Legal Counsel. S. Washington, Dr. M. Chen, Primary Inventor. For just a flicker of a moment, something shifted in Maya's expression. Not fear, not anger, something cooler, more controlled. The kind of calculating calm that chess grandmasters wear before executing a devastating move they'd planned 8 steps earlier. May I collect my personal items from the lab, she asked, her voice soft but steady as a metronome. Marcus seemed momentarily thrown off by her composure. Yes, of course. Someone from HR will. That won't be necessary, Maya interrupted, standing with deliberate slowness. She gathered her tablet, her notebook, and her pen, a vintage fountain pen her grandfather had given her when she graduated with her Ph.D. in biochemistry. Not one item out of place, not one paper clip disturbed. Her Helix ID badge still hung from the lanyard around her neck, the photo showing the same composed expression she wore now. The room remained frozen as she moved toward the door, her flat shoes making soft taps against the polished floor. Each step measured, unhurried, like she was simply heading to lunch rather than being escorted out of the company she'd helped build from a promising startup into a pharmaceutical powerhouse. At the door, she paused, turning just slightly. Enough to catch Marcus in her peripheral vision. You should really verify who holds the patents to our core technologies before making these kinds of decisions, Marcus. Then she was gone, leaving behind a boardroom that finally remembered how to breathe. Shallow, nervous exhales, but breathing nonetheless. No one spoke, but everyone thought the same thing. What just happened? Marcus, looking more confused than victorious, shuffled his papers and mumbled something about continuing the presentation. But the energy had vanished from the room like air from a punctured balloon. Out in the hallway, Maya glanced at her watch. 11:47 a.m. Plenty of time before her patent meeting. The real one, not the corporate performance Marcus had just directed. She walked past the motivational posters with their mountain climbers and soaring eagles, past the trophy case displaying Helix's industry awards, 3 of which bore her name as lead researcher. Her lab was on the 3rd floor, the crown jewel of Helix's research facilities. Glass-walled and state-of-the-art, it had been her second home for nearly a decade. The security panel recognized her badge with a cheerful green light, not deactivated. Yet, apparently, Marcus wasn't as efficient as he believed himself to be. Inside, her team looked up with expressions ranging from confusion to poorly concealed panic. Word traveled fast in research departments. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dr. Chen, began Olivia, her senior research assistant, eyes wide with concern. We heard that, yes, Maya said simply, moving toward her private office at the back of the lab. It's happening. I need you all to continue the neurogenesis trials exactly as planned. The protocol is solid. But without you, started Theo, the newest member of her team, fresh from his postdoc at MIT. Science doesn't stop for corporate restructuring, Maya replied, her voice gentle but firm. The work matters more than the drama. In her office, she didn't waste time on sentimentality. Her box was already prepared. She'd sensed the shifting winds weeks ago when Marcus had started scheduling meetings with her team without including her. One framed photo of her parents at her PhD graduation. A small jade plant she'd kept alive through 3 office relocations. And a red flash drive, unassuming but containing backups of her research notes going back 15 years. The most important items weren't physical anyway. They were locked safely in her mind and in the carefully structured legal documents she'd filed years ago, long before Marcus Fletcher had appeared with his MBA and his sleek presentations about innovation acceleration. As she placed the last item in her box, Dr. Keller appeared at her door, his usual confident posture diminished. Maya, he hesitated, glancing over his shoulder. This isn't right. The board doesn't understand what they're doing. She offered him a small smile. They will soon enough. Is there anything I can do? He asked, lowering his voice. Just make sure the team continues the trials. The patients in the Alzheimer's study need those results, regardless of who's running the lab. He nodded, looking relieved to have a concrete task. I'll make sure of it. Maya picked up her box and walked out, past the concerned faces of her team, past the security guard who couldn't quite meet her eyes, and into the elevator that would take her to the lobby. She didn't look back. Looking back was for people who didn't know where they were going next. The security guard at the front desk, Ramirez, who'd always greeted her by name every morning for 7 years, looked pained as she approached. Dr. Chen, they told me to collect your badge. Of course, Carlos, she said kindly, removing the lanyard from around her neck. Just doing your job. As she handed it over, the main doors swished open, and in walked 2 people who definitely weren't Helix employees. One woman in a crisp navy suit, another in a charcoal gray pantsuit with a leather portfolio. Both exuded the unmistakable aura of high-powered attorneys. We're here for the 12:30 meeting with Mr. Fletcher, the first woman announced to the receptionist, whose fingers froze over her keyboard. Regarding the neurogenesis 7 patent review, added the second woman, her eyes landing on Maya and her box of belongings. Recognition flashed across her face. Dr. Chen? Sarah Washington from Blackwood Partners. We spoke last week about the patent finalization. Maya nodded calmly. Yes, of course. I believe Mr. Fletcher is still in the quarterly review meeting. The receptionist, looking increasingly flustered, picked up her phone. I'll let him know his 12:30 is here. Marcus appeared 7 minutes later, striding into the lobby with the confidence of someone who believed he'd already won the day's battles. His smile faltered slightly when he saw Maya still standing there, but he recovered quickly, extending his hand to the attorneys. Welcome to Helix Pharmaceuticals. Marcus Fletcher, Chief Innovation Officer. So pleased you could come discuss our exciting patent portfolio. Sarah Washington didn't take his offered hand. Instead, she glanced at Maya's box of belongings, then back to Marcus. I understand there's been a personnel change today that directly impacts our meeting. Marcus's smile remained fixed in place. The night deepened around her balcony, the city settling into its evening rhythm. In labs across the pharmaceutical district, experiments continued, cultures grew, data accumulated, the steady, unstoppable progress of science that had always been her true north. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but tonight, Maya Chen allowed herself to recognize a simple truth. In the experiment of standing her ground, the results were conclusive. Some called it karma, others called it justice. Maya, ever the scientist, simply considered it the natural outcome when people failed to observe what was right in front of them all along. Back at Helix Pharmaceuticals, the lights in the executive boardroom still burned bright, the emergency meeting now entering its 5th hour. Marcus Fletcher's carefully constructed narrative was unraveling strand by strand, his innovation strategy suddenly reduced to a single, devastating question: how do you replace the irreplaceable? Maya didn't need to witness it to know how it was playing out. In science, as in life, certain reactions were entirely predictable if you understood the underlying chemistry. And Maya Chen had always been exceptional at chemistry. The morning dawned clear and purposeful. Maya rose early, as she had every day for the past 15 years. Old habits were comforting, even when everything else was in flux. She prepared her usual breakfast, steel-cut oats with fresh berries, green tea with a twist of lemon, and reviewed her notes for the day ahead. By 8 a.m., her phone had accumulated 17 new messages. 3 from board members at Helix, attempting to establish direct communication channels. 5 from recruiters who had somehow caught wind of her availability. 1 from Marcus Fletcher himself, that one she deleted without reading. The remaining messages were from colleagues, former classmates, and research partners, all expressing variations of shock, support, and curiosity about her next moves. Maya responded only to Dr. Keller's text, team continuing trials per protocol. Bored in disarray. Marcus looking like he swallowed his Mont Blanc pen. What's your next move? Her reply was simple, focus on the patients in the trial. I'll handle the rest. At 9:30 a.m., dressed in a charcoal gray suit that she reserved for patent hearings and grant presentations, Maya arrived at Blackwood Partners for the pre-meeting strategy session. Eliza was waiting in the conference room, along with 2 patent specialists and a pharmaceutical industry consultant. Morning, Maya, Eliza greeted her, pushing forward a cup of the specific dark roast coffee she knew Maya preferred. Ready to change the future of your research on your own terms? Maya accepted the coffee with a grateful nod. I'd prefer to be in the lab right now, actually. But since that's not an option, let's make this count. For the next hour, they reviewed potential scenarios, counteroffers, and leverage points. The pharmaceutical consultant, a former CFO at a rival company, provided market valuations for the Neurogenesis 7 patent that made even Eliza raise her eyebrows. $300 million at minimum, he concluded, tapping his tablet. If the phase 3 trials continue to show the efficacy rates from phase 2, we're looking at potentially $850 million to $2 billion over the patent lifetime. It's not just an Alzheimer's treatment, the applications for other neurodegenerative conditions could double or triple that figure. Maya absorbed this information with scientific detachment. She'd never been motivated by money, her modest condo and 10-year-old car were testament to that. But she understood that in the corporate world, value was measured in dollars, and dollars determined respect. What's our primary objective today? Asked one of the patent specialists. Maya looked up from her notes. To ensure the Neurogenesis 7 research continues without interruption. The patients in the trial can't afford delays because of corporate politics. Eliza nodded. And our secondary objective is to secure Maya's rightful compensation and recognition as the patent holder, while establishing terms that protect her control over future applications of the technology. At 11 a.m. sharp, Maya's team arrived at Helix Pharmaceuticals, not through the main entrance where she'd exited with her box of belongings just yesterday, but through the executive entrance, escorted directly to the boardroom where she'd been dismissed 24 hours earlier. The room looked different today. The polished mahogany table was the same, the view of the city skyline unchanged, but the energy had transformed. Gone was Marcus Fletcher's territorial confidence, replaced by a palpable tension that hummed like an electrical current. Patricia Winters, Helix's chief legal officer, greeted them at the door with professional courtesy that couldn't quite mask her discomfort. Thank you for coming, Dr. Chen. The board is assembled. Inside, the full board of directors sat in various states of discomfort. Some couldn't meet Maya's eyes. Others watched her with newfound wariness, as if suddenly recognizing a force they'd underestimated. At the far end, Marcus sat with his shoulders rigid, his expression locked in a neutral mask that must have required significant effort to maintain. Notably absent were the $85 branded notebooks. In their place were legal documents, financial projections, and what appeared to be hastily prepared analyses of Helix's research pipeline with and without the Neurogenesis 7 patent. The board chairman, Dr. William Haverford, rose as Maya entered. His handshake was firmer than protocol required, a small tell that revealed his anxiety. Dr. Chen, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. We find ourselves in an unexpected situation that we hope to resolve amicably. Maya took her seat. Across from him, Eliza and their team arranging themselves like chess pieces on her side of the table. I'm here out of respect for the research and the patients who are counting on it, Dr. Haverford. He nodded, clearing his throat. Yes, of course. The Alzheimer's trials. We want to assure you that patient care remains our highest priority. From the corner of her eye, Maya could see Marcus shift uncomfortably. Patient care had never featured prominently in his innovation acceleration presentations. To that end, Dr. Haverford continued, we would like to propose a revised licensing agreement that would allow Helix to continue development and commercialization of Neurogenesis 7, while acknowledging your ownership of the underlying patent. At a nod from Haverford, Patricia Winters distributed documents to Maya's team. As you'll see, we're proposing a significantly increased royalty percentage, a seat on our scientific advisory board, and a special recognition program that would highlight your contribution as the primary inventor. Maya didn't touch the document. Instead, she looked directly at Dr. Haverford. And my research team? A flicker of confusion crossed his face. Your team would continue their work under our new R&D leadership structure, of course. Under Marcus Fletcher? Maya asked, her voice neutral but her gaze unwavering. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. All eyes flickered. Between Maya and Marcus, who had suddenly developed an intense interest in his water glass. The organizational structure is still being evaluated, Dr. Haverford replied carefully. Eliza opened her portfolio, extracting a single sheet of paper. Before we discuss Helix's proposal, I believe it would be helpful to establish some context. We've prepared a brief timeline of Dr. Chen's contributions to Helix Pharmaceuticals, including the 8 patents she's developed that form the backbone of your current product pipeline. You'll note that the Neurogenesis 7 patent is highlighted in Section 3, along with its projected market valuation. The document made its way around the table, faces growing increasingly grave as board members absorbed the figures. Additionally, Eliza continued, we've taken the liberty of preparing an analysis of how Neurogenesis 7's removal from Helix's pipeline would impact your 5-year projections, stock valuation, and standing with the FDA's Breakthrough Therapy designation program. This second document caused an even more profound silence as it circulated. One board member actually winced. Now, Eliza said, her voice pleasant but firm, we're prepared to discuss terms that would allow Helix continued access to Dr. Chen's intellectual property. However, those terms will need to reflect not just appropriate financial compensation, but also structural changes that ensure the research integrity that Dr. Chen has maintained throughout her career. Dr. Haverford glanced at Marcus, then back to Maya. What exactly are you proposing, Dr. Chen? Maya leaned forward slightly. I want full oversight of the Neurogenesis 7 trials, with my original research team intact and reporting directly to me. I want a formal role as Chief Scientific Advisor with veto power over any protocol changes. I want the right to publish findings without corporate filtering. And I want the patients in the trial protected from any business decisions that might delay or compromise their treatment. And in return? Patricia Winters asked. In return, Helix maintains its exclusive licensing rights to a treatment that could transform how we approach neurodegenerative disease and potentially generate billions in revenue. The room fell silent again as the board absorbed her terms. Maya could practically see the calculations happening behind their eyes, weighing her demands against the projections they'd just reviewed, measuring corporate ego against financial reality. Marcus finally broke his silence. This is extortion. You're holding a potentially life-saving treatment hostage for personal gain. Maya turned to him, her expression unchanged. No, Marcus. I'm ensuring that a potentially life-saving treatment isn't compromised by quarterly profit targets or innovation buzzwords. The science comes first. It always has. Dr. Haverford raised a hand to silence Marcus before he could respond. Dr. Chen, could you and your team give us a few minutes to confer privately? Of course, Maya replied, rising smoothly. We'll wait in the adjacent conference room. As they exited, Eliza leaned close to Maya. They're going to counter. Probably try to limit your oversight role or put conditions on your veto power. Maya nodded. Let them. As long as the core research protections remain intact, I can be flexible on the peripheral details. For 37 minutes, they waited, reviewing contingency plans and alternate proposals. Maya remained calm, occasionally checking her phone for updates from her research team, who were continuing their work despite the corporate drama unfolding above them. When they were called back in, the atmosphere had shifted again. Marcus Fletcher was no longer seated at the table. His absence spoke volumes. Dr. Haverford addressed Maya directly. We've discussed your terms and are prepared to accept them, with minor modifications, which Patricia will detail. Before we proceed, however, I want to acknowledge that mistakes were made in how your position at Helix was handled. On behalf of the board, I apologize for yesterday's events. Maya accepted the apology with a small nod. It wasn't about vindication anymore, it was about clearing the path forward for the research that had always been her true priority. For the next 2 hours, they negotiated details, clarified terms, and constructed an agreement that would fundamentally reshape Maya's relationship with Helix Pharmaceuticals. no longer an employee but a partner. Not subject to corporate hierarchy but protected by legally binding authority over her own invention. By late afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the boardroom windows, casting long shadows across the documents spread before them, the final agreement took shape. Maya would receive a $1 million signing bonus, royalties starting at 15% of net revenue, full control over the research protocols, and a position as independent chief scientific advisor reporting directly to the board. Marcus Fletcher's Innovation Acceleration Initiative would be suspended pending review. Maya's research team would remain intact, with additional resources allocated to support the ongoing trials. As the lawyers finalized the language and prepared the documents for signatures, Dr. Haverford approached Maya by the window. "You know," he said quietly, "many people would have simply taken their patent elsewhere after being treated as you were. Burned the bridge entirely." Maya looked out at the research campus below, where scientists in lab coats moved between buildings, carrying on the work that had always been her anchor. "Science isn't about ego, Dr. Haverford. It's about contribution. The patients in our trial don't care about boardroom politics or who has the corner office. They care about whether our compound can help them remember their grandchildren's names." He nodded slowly. "Marcus has been reassigned to our Singapore office. Special Projects Division." Maya allowed herself a small smile. "Corporate exile. Creative. Sometimes traditional approaches are still the most effective," he replied. "Will you be returning to your lab tomorrow?" "No," Maya said, surprising him. "I'll be working remotely for the next 2 weeks while I evaluate some independent research proposals. But my team has their instructions, and I'll be reviewing data daily." What Maya didn't mention was the 3 offers already on her desk from research institutions offering her carte blanche to establish new neurogeneration labs under her direction. Or the venture capital firm that had reached out about founding her own biotech startup with the Neurogenesis 7 patent as its cornerstone. She hadn't decided yet which path to take. For now, securing the continued progress of her research under proper scientific oversight was enough. As the final documents were signed and notarized, Maya felt no triumph, no vindication, just the quiet satisfaction of a hypothesis confirmed. People who valued profit over progress, who mistook corporate authority for true leadership, who believed titles outweighed contributions, they would eventually face the natural consequences of their miscalculations. It wasn't revenge. It was simply chemistry. The morning after the negotiation, Helix Pharmaceuticals felt like a different company. The sleek glass building looked the same from the outside, but inside, a current of unease rippled through every floor, every department, every conversation by the coffee machines. Marcus Fletcher's office stood empty, his motivational books and awards conspicuously absent from the shelves. A small sign on his door simply read, "Temporarily reassigned." The rumor mill had already transformed that euphemism into 1,000 different scenarios, each more dramatic than the last. It was the one argument that could reach her, not appeals to loyalty or financial incentives, but the direct impact on the patients she'd been working to help. "What guarantees would I have that the situation with Mr. Fletcher wouldn't repeat itself with another executive down the line?" she asked. "Your contract would include ironclad protections, reviewed by your own legal team," he assured her. "But more importantly, the board has learned its lesson. We allowed ourselves to be seduced by flashy promises of innovation without understanding the scientific foundation of our own company's value. That won't happen again." Maya didn't respond immediately, letting the silence stretch between them. As she considered the implications, "I'd need complete reorganization of the research division," she said finally. "Merit-based advancement, not political connections. Protected time for exploratory research, not just projects with immediate commercial applications. And a formal mentorship program for young scientists to ensure they understand how to protect their intellectual contributions." "All reasonable requests," Dr. Haverford agreed, the relief evident in his voice. "Shall I have legal draft the formal offer?" "Yes," Maya decided. "But I'll still need to review my options carefully before making a final decision." After ending the call, Maya sat in the growing darkness of her apartment, watching the city lights emerge against the evening sky. The events of the past 2 days had transformed her professional landscape in ways she couldn't have anticipated. From dismissed department head to the most sought-after scientific mind in her field, courted by institutions and corporations alike. There was a certain poetry to it, she thought. Not because she'd proven Marcus Fletcher wrong, that had never been her objective. But because she'd stayed true to her priorities throughout, the integrity of the research, the welfare of the patients, the advancement of scientific understanding. In doing so, she'd created a stronger position for herself than any corporate maneuvering could have achieved. Her phone lit up with a text from Olivia. Rumor mill says they're offering you Fletcher's job plus more. Please say yes. The lab needs you. The patients need you. And I need someone who understands why we can't rush science for quarterly reports. Maya smiled, feeling the first real certainty she'd experienced since walking out of Helix with her box of belongings. Perhaps the most powerful response to being underestimated wasn't walking away, but returning on your own terms, stronger and more secure than before. She texted back a single word, considering. Then she opened her laptop and began drafting a list of conditions for her return, not demands born of vindication or retaliation, but a blueprint for creating the kind of research environment where true innovation could flourish. Where scientists were protected, patients were prioritized, and the pursuit of knowledge wasn't subordinated to the pursuit of profit. This wasn't just about her future. It was about reshaping the structure that had failed her and would fail others if left unchanged. It was about transforming a moment of personal vindication into systemic improvement. The following morning, Maya arrived at Helix Pharmaceuticals shortly after dawn. Not through the executive entrance this time, but through the researcher's entrance that led directly to the laboratories. Her keycard still worked, a small detail that spoke volumes about the company's hopes for her return. The labs were quiet at this hour, most of the team not due to arrive for another hour. Maya moved through the familiar space, reacquainting herself with the environment that had been her second home for 15 years. The centrifuges and spectrometers, the culture incubators and sequencing machines, tools of discovery that had always made more sense to her than corner offices and boardroom politics. She stopped at her old lab bench, running her fingers along the smooth surface. This was where she'd first isolated the enzyme that became neurogenesis 7, working late one night when most of the company had gone home. The moment of discovery hadn't been dramatic, no eureka shout or triumphant gesture. Just a quiet realization. A pattern in the data that suggested something remarkable, a compound that could potentially stabilize neural pathways affected by neurodegenerative disease. I thought I might find you here, came a voice from the doorway. Maya turned to see Olivia, arriving earlier than usual, a cautious hope in her expression. Just visiting, Maya replied. Remembering why we do this work. Olivia nodded, understanding. The board's offer, are you considering it? I am, Maya confirmed. But only if certain conditions are met. Conditions that would change how research is valued and protected at Helix. Like what? Olivia asked, setting down her bag and moving closer. Like a formalized inventor rights program. Protected time for basic research without immediate commercial applications. A mentorship pipeline for young scientists to learn not just laboratory techniques, but how to navigate the corporate scientific interface. Olivia's eyes widened slightly. That would transform how research happens here. That's the idea, Maya replied. What happened to me shouldn't happen to the next generation of scientists. But walking away won't change the system. Sometimes you have to rebuild from within. As morning light streamed through the laboratory windows, illuminating the instruments of discovery that had always been Maya's true companions, she felt a sense of purpose crystallizing within her. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was rightfully hers, the patent, the recognition, the compensation. It was about creating something new from the fragments of what had been broken. In the face of dismissal, she had remained dignified. In the face of underestimation, she had remained prepared. And now, in the face of vindication, she would remain focused not on the past, but on the future she could help shape. Later that day, in a sunlit conference room far removed from the shadowed boardroom where she'd been dismissed, Maya sat across from Dr. Haverford and the board's executive committee. Before them lay her counteroffer, not just a negotiation for her own position, but a blueprint for transforming Helix's relationship with its scientific talent. This is ambitious, Dr. Haverford said finally, after reviewing the document. It's necessary, Maya corrected gently. Not just for me, but for every researcher who will ever work at Helix. The true value of this company isn't in its stock price or its marketing campaigns. It's in the discoveries that happen in those laboratories. Protect the discoverers, and you protect the discoveries. The silver-haired board member who had been so dismissive in earlier meetings studied Maya with newfound respect. You could have taken your patents and walked away. Started fresh somewhere else with your reputation enhanced and your bank account significantly expanded. Why come back to rebuild what wasn't serving you? Maya considered the question carefully. Because starting over is easy. Fixing what's broken is harder, but ultimately more valuable. And because those patients in the trial deserve continuity of care from the team that understands this treatment better than anyone else in the world. As the meeting continued, the outlines of a new Helix began to take shape, one that would balance scientific integrity with business necessity, that would protect intellectual contributions while driving commercial success. Not through flashy Initiatives or innovation buzzwords, but through the patient, methodical work of creating structures that served both the science and the scientists. It wouldn't be easy. Corporate culture didn't change overnight, and there would be resistance from those who preferred the old hierarchies. But in that moment, watching the board members engage genuinely with her vision, Maya knew that her most important discovery might not be neurogenesis 7 at all, but the blueprint for a research environment where the next life-changing treatment could emerge without its creator being diminished in the process. The transformation had begun not when she walked out with her box of belongings, not when she leveraged her patent ownership for $1 million settlement, but in this moment, choosing to return and rebuild rather than retreat and restart. Sometimes, Maya reflected, the most powerful response to being underestimated isn't proving others wrong. It's creating a world where such underestimation becomes impossible for those who follow in your footsteps. The morning after the negotiation, Helix Pharmaceuticals felt like a different company. The sleek glass building looked the same from the outside, but inside, a current of unease rippled through every floor, every department, every conversation by the coffee machines. Marcus Fletcher's office stood empty, his motivational books and awards conspicuously absent from the shelves. A small sign on his door simply read, "Temporarily reassigned." The rumor mill had already transformed that euphemism into 1,000 different scenarios, each more dramatic than the last. "I heard they sent him to Singapore," whispered a marketing coordinator to her colleague as they waited for the elevator. "Special Projects Division." "Special Projects is corporate speak for, we can't fire you yet but please quit," her friend replied, glancing around to ensure no executives were within earshot. By 10 a.m., the company-wide email arrived, clinically worded and stripped of emotion. Organizational update. Dr. Maya Chen will be continuing her association with Helix Pharmaceuticals as independent chief scientific advisor, overseeing the Neurogenesis 7 research program. Marcus Fletcher has accepted a strategic role in our Asia-Pacific division. What the email didn't mention spoke volumes. Nothing about innovation acceleration. Nothing about AI-integrated platforms. Nothing about the future Marcus had so confidently proclaimed just 48 hours earlier. In the R&D department, Maya's team gathered in their daily morning meeting, an atmosphere of cautious relief replacing yesterday's uncertainty. Olivia, the senior research assistant, stood at the whiteboard where Maya usually outlined the day's priorities. "I spoke with Dr. Chen this morning," she announced to the assembled scientists. "She'll be working remotely for 2 weeks but remaining fully engaged with our progress. All protocols continue as established. She specifically asked me to remind everyone that the patients in the trial remain our absolute priority." Theo, the MIT postdoc, raised his hand. "What about the AI integration platform that Fletcher was pushing? Are we still required to allocate resources to that?" "No," Olivia replied with a small smile. "That initiative has been suspended pending review." A collective exhale seemed to pass through the room. The AI platform had been Marcus's pet project, flashy, marketable, but scientifically dubious. It had diverted precious time from their core research, forcing them to produce demonstration models that looked impressive in boardroom presentations but added little value to actual drug discovery. "So we're just continuing our work?" asked Dr. Patel, looking both relieved and skeptical, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Exactly," Olivia confirmed. "Science as usual." Dr. Chen also mentioned that we'll be receiving additional resources for the Phase 3 trials. As the team dispersed to their stations, energized by the return to scientific focus, a different kind of meeting was taking place on the executive floor. Patricia Winters, the chief legal officer, sat across from Dr. Haverford and 3 board members, her expression grave as she slid documents across the polished table. "These are the complete patent records for all current Helix products and research pipelines," she explained. "I've highlighted the 7 other patents where Dr. Chen is listed as primary inventor or significant contributor." Dr. Haverford scanned the documents, his frown deepening with each page. "And the ownership status of these patents?" "Most are standard employee inventions, fully owned by Helix," Patricia replied. "But 2 others were developed under similar circumstances to Neurogenesis 7, with modified ownership structures that give Dr. Chen significant control." One of the board members, a former pharmaceutical executive with silver hair and a perpetual scowl, tossed his copy of the documents onto the table. "How did we miss this? How did legal allow these exceptions?" Patricia's professional composure didn't waver. The arrangements were properly documented and approved by the previous administration. They were considered appropriate compensation for a scientist of Dr. Chen's caliber, especially given competing offers she had from other institutions. "And Fletcher didn't review these before restructuring the R&D department?" Dr. Haverford asked. He had access to the files, Patricia replied carefully. Whether he reviewed them is another question. The silver-haired board member shook his head. This is a disaster. We've handed enormous leverage to someone we just publicly humiliated. The optics are terrible. The optics are the least of our concerns, countered another board member, a younger woman with a background in biotech venture capital. The neurogenesis 7 patent alone represents over 40% of our projected revenue for the next decade. Without Chen's cooperation, we'd be facing a stockholder revolt within weeks. Dr. Haverford rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of what promised to be a spectacular migraine. Where is Fletcher now? En route to Singapore, Patricia answered. His flight departed 3 hours ago. Make sure he stays there until this blows over, he replied. The last thing we need is for him to make public statements or try to justify his actions. The discussion continued for another hour, dissecting the events that had led to this point and strategizing damage control. The consensus was clear: Maya Chen had outmaneuvered them not through aggression or retaliation, but through careful preparation and an understanding of her own value that the company had failed to recognize. Meanwhile, across town, Maya sat on the balcony of her apartment, laptop open to a video call with Eliza Blackwood. The morning sun warmed her face as she sipped her tea, feeling more rested than she had in months. The agreement's been fully executed, Eliza reported. Funds should hit your account by end of day. How does it feel to be a millionaire, Dr. Chen? Maya smiled slightly. Surreal. And somewhat irrelevant. The money was never the point. I know, Eliza replied. But it doesn't hurt to finally be compensated fairly for your contributions. Any thoughts on your next move? GeneWave has called my office 3 times since yesterday. I'm still considering options, Maya said, glancing at the stack of offers that had accumulated on her dining table. The most important thing is ensuring the neurogenesis trials continue without interruption. These patients have been waiting for hope. I won't let corporate politics delay potential treatments. Eliza nodded, understanding her friend's priorities. Speaking of corporate politics, have you seen the industry blogs this morning? Maya shook her head. She deliberately avoided the news, focusing instead on reviewing the latest trial data that Olivia had sent over. Your situation has become something of a rallying point, Eliza explained. Biopharma Today ran a feature on intellectual property rights for research scientists. 2 other prominent researchers have come forward with similar stories of having their innovations minimized or appropriated by corporate leadership. That wasn't my intention, Maya said quietly. I know. But sometimes standing up for yourself creates space for others to do the same. Eliza paused, then added, by the way, Marcus Fletcher's LinkedIn still lists him as Chief Innovation Officer at Helix. No mention of his new strategic role in Singapore. Maya couldn't help but smile. At that, corporate face-saving was an art form unto itself. After ending the call, she turned her attention to the research data. The preliminary results from the Phase 3 trials were promising, patients showing statistically significant improvements in cognitive function after just 8 weeks of treatment. The improvement was modest, but for Alzheimer's patients and their families, even modest improvements could mean precious months of clarity, of connection, of dignity. This was what Marcus had never understood. Drug development wasn't just about market share and shareholder value. It was about the elderly man who might remember his wife's name for 1 more year. The grandmother who could still recognize her grandchildren's faces. The professor who could finish writing the book that had been his life's work. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Olivia, board members touring the lab today. Everyone wearing lab coats and looking extra scientific. Thought you'd want to know. The image made Maya chuckle. Her team had always prided themselves on substance over appearance, focusing on meticulous research rather than performative displays of science for executive visitors. A second text followed, Dr. Haverford. Asking lots of questions about the research process. Seems genuinely interested, not just checking boxes. That was an interesting development. Perhaps the events of the past 48 hours had reminded the board that their company's value lay not in sleek presentations and innovation buzzwords, but in the actual scientific breakthroughs happening in their laboratories. By afternoon, Maya had finished reviewing the data and sent detailed notes back to her team. Then she turned her attention to the offers that had been piling up. 3 research institutions offering prestigious positions with complete autonomy. 2 pharmaceutical companies promising generous budgets and minimal corporate oversight. 1 venture capital firm proposing to fund her own startup with her patents as the foundation. Each option had its appeal. Each represented a path that would allow her to continue her research with greater freedom than she'd had at Helix. But something held her back from committing to any of them just yet. Maya stepped away from her desk and moved to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, patients were participating in the Neurogenesis 7 trial, taking a compound she had discovered, hoping for a miracle or at least a reprieve. Switching institutions now would inevitably cause delays, regardless of legal agreements and technology transfers. Her contemplation was interrupted by another text, this one from Dr. Keller in Legal. Stock up 3% today after initial drop yesterday. Board breathing a little easier but still in panic mode. Fletcher apparently having connectivity issues in Singapore. Can't join emergency calls. What a shame. Maya smiled despite herself. The corporate world had its own form of justice. She was about to return to reviewing offers when her phone rang, an unfamiliar number with a New York area code. Dr. Chen speaking, she answered. Dr. Chen, this is Eleanor Rhodes, science correspondent for the National Health Journal. I'm working on a feature about innovation protection in pharmaceutical research, and your name has come up repeatedly. In my conversations with industry insiders. Would you be willing to comment on the importance of proper attribution and ownership structures for scientific breakthroughs? Maya hesitated. She had never sought publicity, preferring to let her research speak for itself. But perhaps this was an opportunity to advocate for other scientists facing similar situations. I'd be happy to discuss the broader issues, she replied carefully. Though I won't be commenting on specific companies or individuals. Of course, Eleanor agreed. This is about the structural challenges in the industry, not personal conflicts. For the next 30 minutes, Maya outlined the complex relationship between corporate funding and scientific discovery, the importance of protecting researchers' intellectual contributions, and the ultimate goal of advancing treatments that could help patients. The current system often creates a false dichotomy, she explained. Companies believe they must choose between shareholder value and scientific integrity, but the most successful pharmaceutical innovations have always come from environments where researchers are valued, protected, and heard. When scientists have to fight for proper attribution or worry about their discoveries being compromised for quarterly profits, everyone loses, especially the patients waiting for treatments. That's a powerful perspective, Eleanor remarked. One final question, if I may. What advice would you give to young scientists entering the corporate research world today? Maya considered this carefully. Document everything. Understand the legal framework of your contributions. But most importantly, never lose sight of why you became a scientist in the first place. The moment you prioritize corporate advancement over scientific truth, you've already compromised what makes your work valuable. After the interview, Maya felt a strange sense of closure. She hadn't sought to become a case study in intellectual property rights or corporate politics. She'd simply stood her ground when pushed, relied on the protections she'd carefully established, and refused to let her life's work be diminished. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of calls and emails. 3 more interview requests, which she politely declined. A formal invitation to speak at a biotech conference. Messages from former colleagues and classmates, ranging from congratulatory to curious. By evening, Maya had narrowed her options to 2 possibilities: accepting a research director position at Princeton's Neuroscience Institute, or partnering with the venture capital firm to establish her own research company. Both would allow her to continue her work with the autonomy she required, but both would also mean leaving the patients in the Helix trial behind. As she was weighing these options, her phone rang again. Dr. Haverford from Helix. Dr. Chen, he began, his voice notably warmer than during yesterday's negotiations. I hope I'm not interrupting your evening. Not at all, she replied. What can I do for you, Dr. Haverford? I've spent the day with your research team, he said. Remarkable group. Dedicated, precise, passionate about the work. They speak very highly of your leadership. They're exceptional scientists, Maya agreed. I was fortunate to assemble such a team. Yes, well, that's actually why I'm calling. The board has been in discussions all day about the future of Helix's research division. We've come to some conclusions that I'd like to share with you. If you have a moment. Maya settled into her armchair, curious despite herself. I'm listening. We've decided to restructure our approach to innovation, Dr. Haverford explained. Moving away from the accelerated model that Mr. Fletcher was implementing, and toward a more scientifically grounded methodology. That sounds promising. Maya replied cautiously. As part of this restructuring, we're creating a new position, Chief Scientific Officer, with complete autonomy over research priorities and protocols, reporting directly to the board. He paused. We'd like to offer you this position, Dr. Chen. Maya hadn't expected this. She'd anticipated bridges being mended, relationships repaired, but not a complete reversal of the corporate hierarchy that had led to her dismissal. Appreciate the offer, she said carefully. But I've already received several compelling opportunities that would give me similar autonomy without the complicated history. I understand, Dr. Haverford replied. And I wouldn't blame you for walking away. But before you decide, I'd ask you to consider the patients currently enrolled in the Neurogenesis 7 trial. Any transition, no matter how well managed, would create delays. Delays that some of these patients can't afford. It was the one argument that could reach her, not appeals to loyalty or financial incentives, but the direct impact on the patients she'd been working to help. What guarantees would I have that the situation with Mr. Fletcher wouldn't repeat itself with another executive down the line, she asked. Your contract would include ironclad protections, reviewed by your own legal team, he assured her. But more importantly, the board has learned its lesson. We allowed ourselves to be seduced by flashy promises of innovation without understanding the scientific foundation of our own company's value. That won't happen again. Maya didn't respond. Immediately, letting the silence stretch between them as she considered the implications. I'd need complete reorganization of the research division, she said finally. Merit-based advancement, not political connections. Protected time for exploratory research, not just projects with immediate commercial applications. And a formal mentorship program for young scientists to ensure they understand how to protect their intellectual contributions. All reasonable requests, Dr. Haverford agreed, the relief evident in his voice. Shall I have legal draft the formal offer? Yes, Maya decided. But I'll still need to review my options carefully before making a final decision. After ending the call, Maya sat in the growing darkness of her apartment, watching the city lights emerge against the evening sky. The events of the past 2 days had transformed her professional landscape in ways she couldn't have anticipated. From dismissed department head to the most sought-after scientific mind in her field, courted by institutions and corporations alike. There was a certain poetry to it, she thought. Not because she'd proven Marcus Fletcher wrong, that had never been her objective. But because she'd stayed true to her priorities throughout, the integrity of the research, the welfare of the patients, the advancement of scientific understanding. In doing so, she'd created a stronger position for herself than any corporate maneuvering could have achieved. Her phone lit up with a text from Olivia. Rumor mill says they're offering you Fletcher's job plus more. Please say yes. The lab needs you. The patients need you. And I need someone who understands why we can't rush science for quarterly reports. Maya smiled, feeling the first real certainty she'd experienced since walking out of Helix with her box of belongings. Perhaps the most powerful response to being underestimated wasn't walking away, but returning on your own terms, stronger and more secure than before. She texted back a single word, considering. Then she opened her laptop and began drafting a list of conditions for her return, not demands born of vindication or retaliation, but a blueprint for creating the kind of research environment where true innovation could flourish. Where scientists were protected, patients were prioritized, and the pursuit of knowledge wasn't subordinated to the pursuit of profit. This wasn't just about her future. It was about reshaping the structure that had failed her and would fail others if left unchanged. It was about transforming a moment of personal vindication into systemic improvement. The following morning, Maya arrived at Helix Pharmaceuticals shortly after dawn. Not through the executive entrance this time, but through the researchers' entrance that led directly to the laboratories. Her keycard still worked, a small detail that spoke volumes about the company's hopes for her return. The labs were quiet at this hour, most of the team not due to arrive for another hour. Maya moved through the familiar space, reacquainting herself with the environment that had been her second home for 15 years. The centrifuges and spectrometers, the culture incubators and sequencing machines, tools of discovery that had always made more sense to her than corner offices and boardroom politics. She stopped at her old lab bench, running her fingers along the smooth surface. This was where she'd first isolated the enzyme that became Neurogenesis 7, working late one night when most of the company had gone home. The moment of discovery hadn't been dramatic, no eureka shout or triumphant gesture. Just a quiet realization, a pattern in the data that suggested something remarkable, a compound that could potentially stabilize neural pathways affected by neurodegenerative disease. I thought I might find you here, came a voice from the doorway. Maya turned to see Olivia, arriving earlier than usual, a cautious hope in her expression. Just visiting, Maya replied. Remembering why we do this work. Olivia nodded, understanding. The board's offer, are you considering it? I am. Maya confirmed. But only if certain conditions are met. Conditions that would change how research is valued and protected at Helix. Like what? Olivia asked, setting down her bag and moving closer. Like a formalized inventor rights program. Protected time for basic research without immediate commercial applications. A mentorship pipeline for young scientists to learn not just laboratory techniques, but how to navigate the corporate scientific interface. Olivia's eyes widened slightly. That would transform how research happens here. That's the idea, Maya replied. What happened to me shouldn't happen to the next generation of scientists. But walking away won't change the system. Sometimes you have to rebuild from within. As morning light streamed through the laboratory windows, illuminating the instruments of discovery that had always been Maya's true companions, she felt a sense of purpose crystallizing within her. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was rightfully hers, the patent, the recognition, the compensation. It was about creating something new from the fragments of what had been broken. In the face of dismissal, she had remained dignified. In the face of underestimation, she had remained prepared. And now, in the face of vindication, she would remain focused not on the past, but on the future she could help shape. Later that day, in a sunlit conference room far removed from the shadowed boardroom where she'd been dismissed, Maya sat across from Dr. Haverford and the board's executive committee. Before them lay her counteroffer, not just a negotiation for her own position, but a blueprint for transforming Helix's relationship with its scientific talent. This is ambitious, Dr. Haverford said finally, after reviewing the document. It's necessary, Maya corrected gently. Not just for me, but for every researcher who will ever work at Helix. The true value of this company isn't in its stock price or its marketing campaigns. It's in the discoveries that happen in those laboratories. Protect the discoverers, and you protect the discoveries. The silver-haired board member who had been so dismissive in earlier meetings studied Maya with newfound respect. You could have taken your patents and walked away. Started fresh somewhere else with your reputation enhanced and your bank account significantly expanded. Why come back to rebuild what wasn't serving you? Maya considered the question carefully. Because starting over is easy. Fixing what's broken is harder, but ultimately more valuable. And because those patients in the trial deserve continuity of care from the team that understands this treatment better than anyone else in the world. As the meeting continued, the outlines of a new Helix began to take shape, one that would balance scientific integrity with business necessity, that would protect intellectual contributions while driving commercial success. Not through flashy initiatives or innovation buzzwords, but through the patient, methodical work of creating structures that served both the science and the scientists. It wouldn't be easy. Corporate culture didn't change overnight, and there would be resistance from those who preferred the old hierarchies. But in that moment, watching the board members engage genuinely with her vision, Maya knew that her most important discovery might not be neurogenesis 7 at all, but the blueprint for a research environment where the next life-changing treatment could emerge without its creator being diminished in the process. The transformation had begun not when she walked out with her box of belongings, not when she leveraged her patent ownership for $1 million settlement, but in this moment, choosing to return and rebuild rather than retreat and restart. Sometimes, Maya reflected, the most powerful response to being underestimated isn't proving others wrong. It's creating a world where such underestimation becomes impossible for those who follow in your footsteps. 6 months after the fateful board meeting that had changed everything, Maya Chen stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the Renaissance Hotel, addressing the annual Pharmaceutical Innovation Summit. The room was filled with industry leaders, researchers, investors, and media, all hanging on her every word. Innovation isn't a buzzword, she said, her voice calm but commanding. It's not a quarterly initiative or a marketing slogan. True innovation is methodical, patient, sometimes painfully slow. It happens in the quiet moments between experiments, in the careful analysis of unexpected results, in the willingness to be wrong 1,000 times before being right once. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Among them were her entire research team, seated at a table near the front, and the Helix board members, including Dr. Haverford, who nodded slightly as her gaze passed over him. 6 months ago, I found myself at a crossroads, Maya continued. I could have walked away from 15 years of work, taken my patents, and started fresh elsewhere. Many advised me to do exactly that. The audience was silent, many aware of the story that had become something of a legend in pharmaceutical circles, how Maya Chen had been dismissed, only to reveal that she held the patents to the company's most promising drug candidate. How she'd negotiated not just for personal gain, but for structural change. But starting over is easy, she said, echoing the words she'd spoken to the board months earlier. Fixing what's broken is harder, and ultimately more valuable. That's why I chose to return to Helix Pharmaceuticals, not as an employee, but as a partner. Not to restore the old system, but to build something better. On the screen behind her, a slide appeared showing the organizational structure she had implemented at Helix, a radical departure from traditional corporate hierarchy, with research teams arranged in collaborative clusters rather than rigid departments, and a clear path for scientific contributors to maintain rights to their innovations. Today, I'm proud to share that the Neurogenesis 7 trial has advanced to its final phase, with results exceeding our most optimistic projections. Patients who began the trial with significant cognitive impairment are showing sustained improvement in memory, verbal skills, and quality of life measures. A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. Alzheimer's treatments with even modest effects were rare enough. One showing significant, sustained improvement was potentially revolutionary. But I'm not here to talk about Neurogenesis 7. Maya said, surprising the audience. I'm here to talk about what comes next. Not just the next drug candidate or the next breakthrough, but the next generation of scientists who will make discoveries we can't yet imagine. She clicked to a new slide, a formal document with the Helix logo at the top. This is the Helix Scientific Innovation Charter, unanimously approved by our board last month. It codifies the principles that will guide our research going forward. Integrity over expedience, patient outcomes over profit margins, scientific truth over market trends. Most importantly, it establishes the Helix Inventor Partnership Program, ensuring that researchers maintain appropriate ownership of their discoveries, while collaborating with the company to bring them to market. From her vantage point at the podium, Maya could see the reactions rippling through the audience, from skepticism among the old guard executives to barely contained excitement from researchers and scientists. Some will say this approach is naive, that it prioritizes scientific idealism over business realities. To them I say, examine our stock performance over the past 6 months. The next slide showed a graph of Helix's stock price, a sharp dip following the public drama of her dismissal and return, followed by a steady, impressive climb that had outpaced the industry index by nearly 30%. When we value our scientific talent properly, not just with compensation, but with respect, protection, and partnership, we don't diminish our business prospects. We enhance them. We attract the brightest minds. We foster an environment where breakthrough thinking can flourish. And yes, we make more money. Light laughter rippled through the room, acknowledging the bluntness of her statement. But most importantly, Maya continued, her voice softening slightly, we fulfill our fundamental promise to the patients who are waiting for hope. The elderly woman who wants to recognize her grandchildren's faces for a few more years. The professor who hopes to finish writing his life's work. The father who fears losing the memories of raising his children. She paused, letting the human impact of their work sink in. These aren't abstract market segments. They're people. And they deserve our best work, work that isn't compromised by office politics or quarterly pressures or ego-driven decision-making. Maya clicked to her final slide, a simple photograph of her original lab bench, where she'd first discovered the enzyme that became Neurogenesis 7. 6 months ago, I stood at this bench and remembered why I became a scientist. Not for stock options or corner offices or impressive titles, but for moments of discovery that might, someday, alleviate suffering. I invite every company represented here today to examine your own structures, your own priorities. Ask yourselves, are you fostering an environment where the next breakthrough can emerge? Are you protecting your scientific talent, or exploiting it? Are you building for the next quarter, or for the next generation? As Maya concluded her speech, the room erupted in applause, not the polite, measured response typical of industry conferences, but enthusiastic, sustained appreciation that caught even the organizers by surprise. In the front row, Olivia and the research team were on their feet instantly. Dr. Haverford and the board members followed suit, with the silver-haired director who had once dismissed her concerns now applauding with genuine respect. The moderator returned to the podium as Maya stepped aside, announcing, "We'll now open the floor for questions." Dozens of hands shot up immediately. The moderator selected a woman in a crisp suit near the middle of the room. Dr. Chen, your story has inspired many in the industry. But realistically, how transferable is the Helix model to other companies with different cultures and financial pressures? Maya stepped back to the microphone. The specifics will vary, but the principles are universal. Value your scientific talent. Protect their contributions. Create structures that align corporate success with research integrity. The execution may differ, but these foundations can support innovation in any organization willing to prioritize long-term value over short-term metrics. Another question came from a young researcher near the back. What advice would you give to scientists who find themselves in positions similar to yours, where their work is undervalued or their contributions minimized? Maya thought carefully before responding. Document everything, she said, echoing the advice she'd given in her interview months earlier. Understand the legal framework of your contributions from day one, not just when problems arise. Build networks of support within and outside your organization. And remember that your value isn't determined by how others perceive you, but by the integrity and quality of your work. She paused, then added, but also look for allies in unexpected places. Not everyone in leadership positions fails to understand research value. Sometimes they simply need education, context, and a clear explanation of how scientific integrity serves business goals. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, ranging from technical inquiries about the neurogenesis 7 trial to pointed questions about Marcus Fletcher's current role. I believe he's still exploring strategic opportunities in our Asia-Pacific division, Maya responded diplomatically, drawing knowing laughter from the crowd. As the session concluded and Maya stepped away from the podium, she was immediately surrounded by conference attendees eager to speak with her. CEOs seeking advice on implementing similar programs at their companies. Researchers sharing their own stories of patent struggles. Investors curious about Helix's upcoming pipeline. Through the crowd, Maya spotted Eliza Blackwood making her way toward her, accompanied by a tall man Maya didn't recognize. Brilliant speech, Eliza said, giving Maya a brief hug. You've started a movement, whether you intended to or not. Maya smiled. That wasn't the goal, but I'll take it as a positive side effect. Maya, I'd like you to meet Dr. Richard Torres, Eliza said, gesturing to the man beside her. He's the head of the National Institute of Neurological Disorders. Dr. Torres extended his hand. Dr. Chen, your work with neurogenesis 7 has captured our attention for some time. But your approach to research protection and integrity is equally impressive. I wonder if you might consider serving on our advisory board for innovation policy? We're revising guidelines for public-private partnerships, and your perspective would be invaluable. Before Maya could respond, another voice cut through the crowd. Dr. Chen, could I have just a moment of your time? Maya turned to see a young woman, barely out of graduate school by the look of her, clutching a tablet and looking simultaneously determined and terrified. I'll catch up with you at the reception, Maya told Eliza and Dr. Torres, then turned her attention to the young scientist. How can I help you? I'm Sophie Lin, postdoc at Berkeley, the young woman said in a rush. I've been working on a modified approach to your enzyme stabilization technique that might extend its application to Parkinson's disease, and I wondered if you'd be willing to look at my preliminary data? Maya's interest was immediately piqued. Absolutely. Are you free tomorrow morning? We could meet in the hotel lobby. Sophie's eyes widened in surprise. Yes. That would be, yes. Thank you. As Maya navigated through the rest of the conference day, moving from panel discussions to networking events to the evening reception, she found herself repeatedly drawn into conversations about the future of pharmaceutical research. Not just the scientific breakthroughs on the horizon, but the structures that would nurture or hinder them. Late that evening, Maya found a quiet moment on the hotel's rooftop terrace, stepping away from the reception to catch her breath and gather her thoughts. The city lights spread out before her, a constellation of human activity and ambition. Quite a day, came Dr. Haverford's voice from behind her. I think you've launched a revolution. Maya turned to find the Helix board chairman approaching with 2 glasses of champagne, offering one to her. Not a revolution, she corrected, accepting the glass. An evolution. A necessary one. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, looking out at the city. The board meeting went well this morning, Dr. Haverford said finally. The expansion of the neurogenesis program was approved unanimously. Your team will have the additional resources you requested. That's excellent news, Maya replied. The patients on the waiting list will be thrilled. It's still remarkable. To me, he continued, how different things might have been if Marcus Fletcher had simply read the appendix to that 2018 board meeting. Maya smiled slightly. Or if he'd bothered to understand the science before trying to restructure the department. That created it. His loss, our gain, Dr. Haverford said, raising his glass slightly. Though I doubt he sees it that way from Singapore. They shared a moment of quiet amusement before Dr. Haverford's expression grew more serious. You know, when you presented your counteroffer 6 months ago, your vision for transforming our research culture, I thought you were being idealistic. That it would look good on paper but fall apart in practice. And now? Maya asked. Now I think it's the most valuable patent Helix holds, he replied. Not neurogenesis 7, remarkable as it is, but the blueprint you've created for aligning scientific integrity with business success. Other companies are already trying to replicate it. I've had 3 CEOs approach me at this conference alone, asking how we implemented the changes. Maya nodded, unsurprised. The model works because it acknowledges a simple truth: researchers who feel valued, protected, and heard produce better science. Better science leads to better products. Better products lead to better business outcomes. It's not complicated, just uncommon. Until now, Dr. Haverford noted. I suspect it will become much more common, thanks to you. As the evening progressed and the reception began to wind down, Maya found herself reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The dramatic dismissal that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning, not just for her, but for everyone touched by the ripples of that moment. Her research team had flourished under the new structure, with Olivia recently promoted to associate director and Theo publishing a groundbreaking paper on neural pathway regeneration. The Helix stock price had recovered and surpassed its previous highs, with analysts specifically citing the company's new research approach as a competitive advantage. And most importantly, the Neurogenesis 7 trial continued to show promising results, offering hope to patients who had previously had none. But beyond Helix, Maya's stand had catalyzed conversations across the industry. 3 major pharmaceutical companies had announced inventor partnership programs similar to the one she'd established. A consortium of research universities had formed to develop best practices for protecting scientists' intellectual contributions. The ripple effects continued to spread, changing not just individual careers but the very culture of innovation. The next morning, Maya met with Sophie Lin as promised, reviewing the young scientists' data on applying neurogenesis techniques to Parkinson's disease. The approach was creative, methodologically sound, and potentially groundbreaking. This is exceptional work, Maya told her, genuinely impressed. Have you discussed this with your advisor at Berkeley? Sophie shifted uncomfortably. Yes, but he's more interested in pursuing a different direction that has more immediate commercial applications. He says this approach would take too long to develop, even if it might be more effective in the long run. Maya recognized the familiar tension. The pressure to pursue what was expedient rather than what was right. The same pressure that had led to her confrontation with Marcus Fletcher. What if you had the resources to pursue this properly, she asked. The time, the equipment, the support to follow the science where it leads, not where market pressures dictate. Sophie's eyes widened. That would be ideal, obviously. But in the current funding environment, Helix is establishing a new research incubator, Maya interrupted. Specifically for approaches that might not have immediate commercial applications but show scientific promise. We provide the resources and infrastructure, the researchers maintain significant ownership of their innovations. Would you be interested in discussing a potential fellowship? The young scientist's expression transformed from resignation to cautious hope. You're serious? Completely serious, Maya confirmed. Science that matters rarely follows convenient timelines. Sometimes the most valuable discoveries are the ones that require patience, persistence, and protection from short-term thinking. As they continued their discussion, Maya found herself experiencing a profound sense of completion. Not because her work was done, far from it, but because the cycle that had begun with her own dismissal was now extending to the next generation. She had transformed her moment of vulnerability into a platform for systemic change, and now that platform was supporting others who might otherwise have been discouraged or diverted from their true scientific calling. The following week, Maya returned to Helix headquarters, not to the executive floor where Marcus Fletcher had once held court, but to the newly expanded research campus where scientific discovery took center stage. The changes were both physical and cultural. Gone were the motivational posters with their empty platitudes about innovation. In their place hung framed papers published by Helix scientists, alongside photographs of patients whose lives had been improved by the company's treatments. The open office layout that Marcus had implemented, supposedly to foster creative collisions, but primarily to monitor activity, had been replaced with a thoughtful mix of collaborative spaces and private areas where researchers could focus without interruption. The company cafeteria now featured a wall of screens displaying ongoing clinical trials and research milestones, keeping the human impact of their work constantly visible. But the most significant changes weren't visible in the physical space. They were embedded in the contracts, the policies, the daily practices that now governed Helix's approach to innovation. Scientists had protected time for exploratory research. Contributions were recognized and rewarded through the Inventor Partnership Program. Advancement was based on scientific merit rather than political connections. Maya walked through the main research building, stopping occasionally to check in with various teams. Not to monitor or manage them, but to understand their work, offer support where needed, and ensure they had what they needed to succeed. In the Neurogenesis 7 expansion lab, Olivia was leading a team meeting, confidently directing the next phase of research. She paused when she saw Maya in the doorway. Dr. Chen. Perfect timing. We were just discussing the latest patient data. Maya joined the circle, immediately drawn into the scientific discussion. This was where she belonged, not isolated in an executive office, but immersed in the collaborative process of discovery. Her title might have changed, but her fundamental identity as a scientist remained constant. After the meeting, Olivia walked with Maya toward her office. "Have you seen the journal's advance copy?" she asked excitedly. "It arrived this morning," Maya confirmed. The latest issue of the National Medical Journal featured their Neurogenesis 7 Phase 3 results on its cover, with an accompanying editorial about the potential paradigm shift in treating neurodegenerative diseases. It was the kind of recognition that scientists spend careers hoping to achieve, validation not just from the market, but from peers who understood the true significance of the work. "And the patient testimonials for the FDA hearing?" Olivia continued. "They're incredible. Especially Mrs. Abernathy, she's regained enough cognitive function to resume teaching piano lessons. After 2 years of not being able to recognize her own instrument." Maya nodded, feeling the familiar surge of purpose that had sustained her through the darkest moments of uncertainty. This, the tangible impact on human lives, had always been the true measure of success, regardless of corporate politics or market valuations. As they reached Maya's office, they found Dr. Keller waiting outside, a tablet in hand and an expression of barely contained excitement on his face. "Maya," he said, forgetting formality in his enthusiasm, "you're going to want to see this immediately." He handed her the tablet, open to a financial news site. The headline read, "Breaking, Neurotech CEO Marcus Fletcher steps down amid investor pressure." Maya skimmed the article quickly, piecing together the story. After his strategic reassignment to Singapore, Marcus had leveraged his connections to secure a CEO position at a smaller biotech startup, promising to implement the same innovation acceleration approach he'd championed at Helix. 6 months later, the company was facing clinical trial setbacks, staff exodus, and shareholder revolt. The board cited fundamental disagreements about research methodology and timeline expectations as the reason for the separation, Dr. Keller pointed out, barely suppressing a smile. Maya handed the tablet back without comment. She felt no satisfaction in Marcus Fletcher's downfall, only confirmation that approaches based on hype rather than substance eventually revealed their emptiness. "Let's focus on our work," she said simply. "We have the FDA hearing next month, and patients waiting for this treatment." As Dr. Keller and Olivia left to return to their respective responsibilities, Maya entered her office, a space that reflected her priorities. Unlike the sleek, sterile executive suite that Marcus had occupied, with its abstract art and status symbols, Maya's office was functional and welcoming. One wall featured framed photographs of her research teams throughout the years. Another displayed a timeline of the Neurogenesis project from initial discovery through clinical trials. Her desk held the same items she'd packed in her box that fateful day: the photo of her parents at her graduation, the jade plant that had survived 3 office moves, and her grandfather's fountain pen. But now they were accompanied by new symbols of her journey: the formal patent certificate for Neurogenesis 7, a thank you letter from the first patient to complete the trial, and a small sculpture given to her by her team, inscribed with the words, "Integrity first, always." Maya settled at her desk, reviewing her calendar for the day. A meeting with the research incubator to review Sophie Lynn's proposal. A video call with the FDA regarding the upcoming hearing. Lunch with Eliza to discuss expanding the Inventor Partnership Program to include international protections. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Haverford, "Board approves full funding for Parkinson's application research. Green light whenever you're ready." Maya smiled, sending back a simple, "Thank you. We'll begin immediately." Outside her window, she could see researchers moving purposefully between buildings, engaged in the quiet, methodical work of scientific progress. Not the flashy, disruptive innovation that captured headlines, but the patient, rigorous innovation that transformed lives. She thought back to that moment in the boardroom 6 months earlier, when Marcus Fletcher had declared it was time for dinosaurs to make room for evolution. He'd been right about one thing: evolution was necessary. But true evolution wasn't about discarding the foundations of scientific integrity for quick profits and flashy presentations. It was about building upon those foundations, strengthening them, adapting them to new challenges while preserving their essential truth. Maya opened her laptop and began typing a new document, the proposal for a formal mentorship program that would pair experienced researchers with promising young scientists, ensuring that the next generation would enter the field not just with technical skills but with the knowledge and tools to protect their contributions and maintain their scientific integrity. This, she reflected, was perhaps her most important patent yet, not a chemical compound or a treatment protocol, but a blueprint for valuing and protecting the human elements of innovation. A framework that recognized that behind every breakthrough, every discovery, every advancement that improved human lives, there were people whose work deserved respect, protection, and proper attribution. In the end, reclaiming her patent for $1 million hadn't been about the money. It had been about reclaiming something far more valuable, the recognition that true innovation couldn't be accelerated, automated, or acquired through corporate maneuvering. It emerged from environments where scientific integrity was valued above all else, where researchers were partners rather than resources, and where the ultimate measure of success wasn't quarterly profits but human impact. That was the true legacy of Maya Chen, not just a treatment that would help countless patients, but a fundamental shift in how scientific contribution was valued, protected, and celebrated. A shift that would ensure the next Maya Chen wouldn't have to fight the same battles, but could focus entirely on the next discovery, the next breakthrough, the next advancement in human knowledge and well-being. And that, Maya thought as she continued typing, was worth far more than $1 million. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.